Captain Tae-ho Kim stared at the message on his screen. His hands shook as he read it again. The words were simple, but they meant death for everyone on New Busan. All human colonies must evacuate. The Vorthon Empire is coming. Behind him, his bridge crew worked fast. They sent warnings to every city on the planet. 3 million people lived on New Busan. 3 million people who needed to leave their homes and run. "Sir," said his communication officer, "we're getting calls from everywhere. People want to know what's happening." Tae-ho rubbed his face. How could he explain this? The Vorthon Empire ruled most of the galaxy. They had ships that could destroy planets. They had weapons that could kill stars. And now they wanted to kill every human in space. On the planet below, Mi-young Park ran through the halls of the colony's main building. She was in charge of keeping people safe. But how could anyone be safe from the Vorthons? "How long do we have?" she asked her assistant. "Maybe 2 weeks, maybe less." Mi-young stopped running. 2 weeks to move 3 million people. It was impossible. They didn't have enough ships. They didn't have enough time. In the science building, Dr. Jun Lee worked alone in his lab. He studied pieces of Vorthon technology that human ships had found. The aliens were smart. Their ships were made of living metal that could fix itself. Their computers used the brains of other species. But tonight, June found something new. The Vorthons didn't just want to kill humans. They wanted to take human brains and use them in their machines. Humans thought differently than other aliens. The Vorthons knew this. They wanted to steal that difference. June's hands shook as he saved his data. He had to tell someone. But who would believe him? Far away in space, the Vorthon fleet moved toward human worlds. Admiral Kexton stood on the bridge of his flagship. Around him, 10,000 warships flew in perfect order. Each ship was bigger than a human city. Each ship carried enough weapons to destroy a world. "How long until we reach Earth?" he asked. 5 days, sir," Kexton smiled. His species had ruled the galaxy for 1,000 years. They had destroyed hundreds of worlds. They had made slaves of entire star systems. Humans would be just another victory. Behind him, Commander Yojin Choi studied reports about human technology. The humans had fast ships, but they were small. They had weapons, but they were weak. The humans would fight, but they would lose quickly. "Sir," she said, "our scouts report something strange. The humans are building something called Project Silent Thunder. But we don't know what it is." Kexton laughed. "It doesn't matter. Whatever they're building, it won't save them." On Earth, Admiral Sang-woo Han sat in a dark room with other human leaders. The planet's defenses were weak. Earth had laser guns and missile bases, but they were nothing against the Vorthon fleet. "We need to evacuate," said one general. "Get as many people away as possible." "Where can they go?" asked another. "The Vorthons control most of space. There's nowhere to hide." Han looked at the reports on his desk. Earth had 4 billion people. The evacuation ships could maybe save 1 million. Maybe. Then engineer Nari Song entered the room. She carried a small data pad. Her face was tired, but her eyes were bright. "The Indomitable is ready," she said. The room went quiet. Everyone knew about the Indomitable. It was humanity's secret weapon, a ship built in the outer parts of the solar system where no alien could see it. "One ship?" asked the general. "Against 10,000? Nari smiled. "It's not about the numbers. It's about how we think." She put her data pad on the table. Pictures appeared in the air above it. The Indomitable looked different from other human ships. It was smaller, faster. Its hull was dark and smooth. "Professor Haewon Yoon designed it," Nari said. "She studied how humans fight wars. We're different from other species. We've been fighting each other for thousands of years. We know things that aliens don't." Han leaned forward. "What kind of things?" "How to trick an enemy. How to use their strength against them. How to win when you're outnumbered." The room stayed quiet. Everyone thought about Earth's history. Humans had always been at war. They fought with sticks and stones. They fought with swords and guns. They fought with planes and tanks. Every human victory came from being smarter than the enemy. "The Vorthons have never fought anyone like us," Nari continued. "They've only fought weak species. Species that gave up easily. They don't know how to fight someone who fights back." Back on New Busan, Tae-ho watched ships take off from the planet. Families crowded into cargo ships. Children cried as they left their homes. Old people said goodbye to places they'd lived their whole lives. But there weren't enough ships. "There would never be enough ships, sir," his officer said. "We're getting a message from Earth." Tae-ho read the new message. It was short but important. The Indomitable was leaving Earth. It would meet the Vorthan fleet in space. One ship against 10,000. Teho looked at his crew. They all knew the odds. They all knew what would happen. But for the first time in days, some of them were smiling. Maybe the humans would lose. Maybe they would all die. But they wouldn't die quietly. They wouldn't die like sheep. Far away, the Vorthan fleet kept moving toward Earth. Admiral Kexthon stood on his bridge and dreamed of victory. He thought about the planets he would conquer. He thought about the slaves he would take. He didn't think about the small dark ship that waited for him in the cold space between stars. He didn't think about the humans who had spent their whole history learning how to fight. He didn't think about the difference between ruling weak species and facing a species that had never known peace. The Vorthan Armada moved forward, confident and proud. They had no idea that everything they believed about war was about to change. Commander Yeo Jin Choi stood in the intelligence room of the Vorthan flagship. Around her, screens showed maps of human space. Red dots marked human colonies. Blue dots showed Vorthan ships moving to attack them. "Tell me about Project Silent Thunder," Admiral Kexthon said as he entered the room. Yeo Jin touched a screen. Pictures appeared showing human construction sites in the outer solar system. "Our spies found these images 6 months ago. The humans were building something in secret." "What kind of something?" "We think it's a weapon. Maybe a big gun or a new type of bomb." Yeo Jin shrugged. "Whatever it is, it can't be very dangerous. Human technology is too simple." Kex then looked at the pictures. The construction sites were empty now. Whatever the humans had built was gone. Find out what they made. "I want to know before we reach Earth." On Earth, Admiral Sang Woo Han walked through the underground tunnels beneath the capital city. The tunnels were full of people. Families sat on the floor with their belongings. Children played games while their parents worried about the future. Han reached a secure door and entered a small room. Inside, 3 people waited for him. Engineer Narisong sat at a table with her computer. Dr. Jun Lee paced back and forth, nervous and excited. And in the corner, Professor Haiwan Yoon read from an old book about military history. "The Indomitable left Earth this morning," Han said. "Captain Do Hyun Kwan is in command." "Good choice," said Professor Yoon, looking up from her book. "Kwan fought in the border wars. He knows how to think fast when things go wrong." Nari opened her computer. "The ship is working perfectly. All systems are ready, but I'm still worried about the odds. 10,000 enemy ships is a lot. Numbers don't always matter in war," Professor Yoon said. She was an old woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. "David beat Goliath. The Greeks beat the Persians. Small forces can win if they're smart." Dr. June stopped pacing. "I finished studying the Vorthan brain samples. I know why they want to capture us instead of just killing us." Everyone looked at him. June took a deep breath. "Humans think differently than other species. We're creative. We can solve problems in ways that aliens can't imagine. The Vorthans want to cut out our brains and use them as living computers." The room went quiet. Finally, Han spoke. "That's not going to happen." "It might," June said. "The Vorthans have done this before. They've captured other species and used their minds as tools. That's how they became so powerful." Professor Yoon closed her book. "Then we have to make sure they never get the chance." In space, the Vorthan fleet moved closer to Earth. The ships looked like metal monsters. Each one was covered in weapons. Each one carried thousands of soldiers. But something strange was happening. The ships were slowing down. Admiral Kexthon stood on his bridge and frowned. "Why are we stopping?" "Sir," said his navigation officer, "our sensors are picking up something unusual. There's a single human ship directly ahead of us." "One ship." Kexthon laughed. "Tell it to move out of our way." "We tried, sir. The ship isn't responding to our messages. It's just sitting there." Kexthon walked to the main screen. Far away, almost too small to see, a dark shape floated in space. It looked tiny compared to the massive Vorthan warships. "What kind of ship is it?" Commander Yojin joined him at the screen. She studied the readings from their sensors. "It's not like any human ship we've seen before. It's smaller than their usual warships, but the energy readings are strange." "Strange how?" "The power signature is different, like they're using technology we don't understand." Kexthon thought about this. The Vorthans had fought hundreds of species. They knew every type of weapon and every kind of ship design. How could humans have something new? "Send Squadron 7 to destroy it," he ordered. "One squadron should be enough for one human ship." On the Indomitable, Captain Do-hyun Kwon sat in his command chair. His bridge was smaller than the bridge of a Vorthan ship, but it felt more alive. Screens showed information about the enemy fleet. His crew worked quietly at their stations. "Sir," said Lieutenant Soo-jin Bae, his tactical officer, "the Vorthans are sending 12 ships toward us." "Only 12? Kwon smiled. "They're not taking us seriously. Should we run?" asked his pilot. "No, we wait. Let them come close." The Indomitable looked small and helpless as the Vorthon squadron approached. The enemy ships were huge and powerful. Their weapons could destroy planets. But Kwon wasn't worried. "Sir," said Soo-jin, "they're almost in range." "Remember the plan," Kwon said to his crew. "We're not here to fight like them. We're here to fight like us." The Vorthon ships opened fire. Bright energy beams shot through space toward the Indomitable. But the human ship wasn't there anymore. It had moved fast and quiet like a shadow. "Where did it go?" demanded the Vorthon squadron commander. His answer came in the form of weapons fire from behind him. The Indomitable had somehow gotten around his ships without being seen. Human missiles hit 2 Vorthon ships before they could react. "Impossible," the commander shouted. "No ship can move that fast." But the Indomitable was already moving again. It flew between the Vorthon ships like a dancer. It was too small and too quick for their big weapons to hit. One by one, the Vorthon ships exploded. The Indomitable used their own size against them. When they tried to shoot the human ship, they hit each other instead. In 10 minutes, all 12 Vorthon ships were destroyed. The Indomitable flew away without a scratch. On the Vorthon flagship, Admiral Kexthan stared at his screens in shock. One human ship had just destroyed an entire squadron. That was impossible. It went against everything he knew about war. "How?" he whispered. Commander Yojin was reading the battle reports. Her face was pale. "Sir, they didn't fight like we expected. They didn't stay in one place and shoot at us. They moved around us. They used our own weapons against us." "That's not how space battles work," Kexton said. "Maybe that's not how we fight space battles," Yojin replied. "But maybe humans fight differently." The Vorthon fleet stopped moving. 10,000 ships floated in space, suddenly uncertain. For the first time in their history, they had met an enemy they didn't understand. And that enemy was just one ship, crewed by a species they had thought was weak and primitive. Admiral Kexton looked at the small dark shape on his screen and realized that everything he thought he knew about humans might be wrong. Captain Do-hyun Kwon stood on the bridge of the Indomitable and watched the enemy fleet on his screens. 10,000 Vorthon ships floated in space like sleeping giants. They had stopped moving after his attack on their squadron. "They're confused," said Lieutenant Soo-jin Bae. "They don't know what to do." Kwon nodded. "Good. Confusion is our friend." The Indomitable was different from every other ship in the galaxy. While alien ships were built like flying fortresses, the Indomitable was built like a hunting knife. It was fast, sharp, and deadly. Professor Haiwan Yoon had designed it after studying every war in human history. She learned that humans won fights by being unpredictable. Other species built bigger weapons and stronger armor. Humans learned to move faster and think quicker. "Sir," said his communication officer, "we're getting a message from the Vorthon fleet." "Put it on screen." Admiral Kexton appeared on the main display. He looked angry and confused. Behind him, Kwon could see the busy bridge of the alien flagship. "Human vessel," Kexton said. "I am Admiral Kexton of the Vorthon Empire. You will surrender immediately or we will destroy you." Kwon smiled. "I'm Captain Do-hyun Kwon of the human ship Indomitable. I have a better idea. You surrender." Several Vorthon officers on the enemy bridge started laughing. The idea of one human ship demanding the surrender of their entire fleet seemed like a joke. But Kexton wasn't laughing. "You destroyed one squadron. We have many more. Surrender now and we will kill you quickly." "You can try," Kwon said, "but you might want to think about this first. We just showed you that your ships can't catch us. We can destroy your squadrons one at a time. How many ships are you willing to lose?" The transmission ended. On the Vorthon flagship, Admiral Kexton stared at the empty screen. No enemy had ever spoken to him like that. No species had ever been confident enough to threaten the Vorthon Empire. "Sir," said Commander Yojin, "what are your orders?" Kexton thought about his options. He could send more ships to attack the human vessel. But what if they failed too? What if this one ship really could destroy squadron after squadron? "Send 3 squadrons this time," he ordered. "And tell them to spread out. Don't let the human ship get behind them. On the Indomitable, the crew prepared for battle, but they weren't scared. They were excited. For the first time in the war, humans had the advantage. 36 enemy ships coming our way, reported Sujin. They're trying to surround us. Let them try, Quan said. Take us into the asteroid field. The Indomitable flew toward a field of floating rocks between Mars and Jupiter. The Vorthan ships followed, but they moved carefully. Their big ships could be damaged by the asteroids. Sir, said the Vorthan squadron commander, the human ship is leading us into the rocks. Should we follow? Yes, came the reply from the flagship. Don't let it escape. The Vorthan ships entered the asteroid field. But the Indomitable had disappeared again. The alien ships spread out searching for their target. Then the attacks began. The human ship appeared from behind a large asteroid and destroyed one Vorthan ship. Then it disappeared again. A minute later, it appeared somewhere else and destroyed another ship. Where is it? Shouted the squadron commander. How can one ship move so fast? The answer was simple but impossible for the Vorthans to understand. The Indomitable used the asteroids like a human soldier uses trees in a forest. It hid behind them, moved between them, and used them as shields. The Vorthan ships were too big to fly safely through the rocks. They had to move slowly and carefully, but the Indomitable was small and fast. It could go anywhere. One by one, the Vorthan ships died. They tried to work together, but the asteroids blocked their communications. They tried to use their heavy weapons, but they kept hitting rocks instead of their target. When the battle was over, 36 Vorthan ships were destroyed. The Indomitable flew away without damage. On the flagship, Admiral Kexthan felt something he had never felt before. Fear. How is this possible? He asked his officers. Commander Yo-Jin had been studying the battle data. Sir, I think I understand what's happening. The humans aren't fighting like we fight. What do you mean? When we fight, we use our strength. We build bigger ships and stronger weapons. We try to overpower our enemies, Kexthan nodded. This was how the Vorthan Empire had always won. But humans are different, Yo-Jin continued. They don't try to be stronger. They try to be smarter. They use the environment around them. They turn our strength into weakness. That's impossible. There are rules to space combat. Maybe there are rules to how we fight space combat, but maybe humans follow different rules. Dr. Young Suk Shin sat in the Indomitable's library, reading old books about human wars. She was a military historian, and her job was to help the crew understand how humans had always fought. Captain, she said over the ship's communication system, I've been thinking about what makes us different from other species. Tell me, Quan replied. Most alien species conquered weaker species. They never had to fight enemies as smart as themselves. But humans have always fought other humans. We've had to get creative because our enemies were just as creative as we were. This was the secret of human warfare. Every human battle was between equals. Both sides were smart, both sides adapted, both sides learned from mistakes. This created a kind of fighting that aliens had never seen. The Vorthans have been winning for so long that they've forgotten how to lose, Dr. Shin continued. They don't know how to adapt when their plans don't work. On his bridge, Captain Quan smiled. Then let's teach them. The Indomitable moved toward the Vorthan fleet again. But this time, Quan had a different plan. He wasn't going to destroy a few more squadrons. He was going to do something that would change everything. Open a communication channel to all ships in the Vorthan fleet, he ordered. Sir? His communication officer looked confused. You heard me. I want every alien in that fleet to hear what I'm about to say. The channel opened. Quan's voice was broadcast to 10,000 enemy ships. Vorthan fleet, this is Captain Quan of the human ship Indomitable. I want you to listen carefully, because what I'm about to tell you might save your lives. On every Vorthan ship, alien officers stopped what they were doing and listened. You think you understand war because you've always won, but you've never fought a species like us. We've been fighting each other for thousands of years. We know things about combat that you can't imagine. Admiral Kexthan tried to cut off the transmission, but his technicians couldn't block it. The human signal was too strong. You can keep sending squadrons against me, Quan continued. I'll keep destroying them. Or you can admit that maybe, just maybe, there are things about fighting that you don't know. The transmission ended. Across the Vorthan fleet, alien officers looked at each other in confusion. No enemy had ever spoken to them like this. No one had ever suggested that the mighty Vorthan Empire didn't understand everything about war. Admiral Kexthan sat in his command chair, and realized that his fleet had stopped moving forward. For the first time in Vorthan history, an entire armada had been stopped by a single enemy ship. The armada froze, not because they couldn't move, but because they didn't know what to do next. Dr. Young-Suk Shin walked through the corridors of the Indomitable carrying an old paper book. Most information was stored on computers now, but she liked reading from real books. This one was about the Battle of Thermopylae, where 300 Spartans held off a massive Persian army. She entered the ship's meeting room where Captain Kwan and his officers were planning their next move. Maps of the local star system floated in the air above the table. "Doctor," Kwan said, "you wanted to explain something to us?" Young-Suk opened her book to a page with pictures of ancient soldiers. "I've been thinking about why we're winning against the Vorthons. It's not because we have better ships or stronger weapons." She touched a button and the maps disappeared. New images appeared showing battles from human history. Soldiers with swords, tanks crossing rivers, planes fighting in the sky. "Humans have always fought other humans," she continued. "Every war we fought was against enemies as smart as us. This made us learn things that other species never had to learn." Lieutenant Su-jin leaned forward.
"What kind of things?"
"Deception, misdirection, using the enemy's strength against them." Young-Suk changed the images to show famous battle strategies. At Cannae, Hannibal let the Romans think they were winning, then surrounded them. At Agincourt, the English used mud and terrain to defeat French knights. Every human victory came from thinking differently than the enemy. Commander Minho Park, the ship's tactical officer, studied the images. "The Vorthons don't think like this." "Exactly," Young-Suk said. "They've conquered hundreds of species, but all of those species were weaker than them. They never had to be creative. They just use bigger weapons and more ships." Captain Kwan stood up and walked to the window. Outside, stars shined in the darkness. Somewhere out there, 10,000 alien ships waited for him to make the next move. "So what you're saying is that we're not just fighting the Vordan Empire, we're fighting their whole way of thinking about war." "Yes, and they don't know how to change." Back on the Vorthan flagship, Admiral Kexthan held a meeting with his commanders. The room was full of aliens from different species, all part of the Vorthan Empire. But today they all looked worried. "Report," Kexthan ordered. Commander Yo-jin stood up. "Sir, we've lost 48 ships to one human vessel. Our tactical computers can't predict what it will do next." "How is that possible? We have the best war computers in the galaxy. Our computers are designed to fight enemies who follow standard battle patterns, but the humans don't follow any patterns we understand." Another commander, a creature with 6 arms and blue skin, spoke up. "Sir, my species has fought many wars, but we always fought species weaker than us. This is different." Kexthan looked around the room. His commanders were scared. The Vorthan Empire had ruled the galaxy for 1,000 years by being stronger than everyone else. "But strength wasn't working against the humans, sir," Yo-jin said quietly. "Maybe we should retreat and study this new enemy, learn how they fight before we attack again." "Retreat?" Kexthan's voice was dangerous. "The Vorthan Empire does not retreat." But even as he said it, he knew his fleet wasn't moving forward anymore. They had been stopped by one small ship and its crew of strange aliens who fought like no one had ever fought before. On Earth, news of the Indomitable's success spread quickly. In the underground tunnels where people waited for evacuation, crowds gathered around video screens to watch reports from space. "The human ship has destroyed nearly 50 enemy vessels," the news reporter said. "The alien fleet has stopped moving toward Earth." People cheered, but Admiral Sang-Woo Han wasn't celebrating yet. He stood in his command center with Professor Haewon Yoon and Engineer Nari Song. "One ship can't stop an entire fleet forever," he said. "Maybe it doesn't have to," Professor Yoon replied. She was looking at reports from across the galaxy. "Something interesting is happening. Other alien species are watching this battle. They're starting to ask questions." Nari brought up a communication screen. "We're receiving messages from the Crystalline Collective, the Void Dancers, and several other species. They want to know how humans learned to fight like this." "Why do they care?" Han asked. "Because they're all part of the Vorthan Empire," Yoon explained. "They were conquered because they couldn't resist Vorthan military power. But now they see that there might be another way to fight." On the edge of Vorthan space, alien species that had been slaves for centuries watched the battle reports with growing excitement. The tentacled ones of Rigel, the crystal cities of Tau Ceti, the mind weavers of Wolf 359. All of them saw the same thing. One human ship was making the mighty Vorthan fleet look foolish. If humans could fight differently, maybe other species could too. Captain Quan felt the change happening across the galaxy. The Indomitable's success wasn't just about one battle. It was about showing every species in the galaxy that the Vorthon way of war wasn't the only way. "Sir," his communication officer said, "we're receiving a message from the Vorthon flagship. It's Admiral Kexthon again. Put him on screen." The alien admiral appeared on the display. He looked tired and angry. "Captain Quan, I want to make you an offer." "I'm listening." "Surrender your ship and your crew. In return, I will spare Earth and all human colonies. You have my word as a Vorthon officer." Quan pretended to think about this. "That's very generous. But I have a counter-offer. Your entire fleet turns around and leaves human space. In return, I won't destroy any more of your ships." Some of the Vorthon officers behind Kexthon looked shocked. No one had ever made demands of the Vorthon Empire. "You're one ship against 10,000, Kexthon said. "Numbers don't mean much if you can't use them effectively. You've learned that already. What makes you think you can keep winning?" Quan smiled. "Because we're humans. We've been fighting impossible odds our entire history. It's what we do." The transmission ended, but Quan wasn't done. He opened a channel to broadcast to the entire galaxy. "This is Captain Do-hyun Quan of the human vessel Indomitable. I want every species listening to understand something important. War isn't just about having the biggest weapons or the most ships. War is about thinking. It's about adapting. It's about finding new ways to win when the old ways don't work." His voice reached thousands of star systems. Billions of aliens heard his words. "The Vorthon Empire conquered you because you fought them the way they wanted to fight. But there are other ways to fight. We humans learned this by fighting each other for thousands of years. Every battle taught us something new. On planets across the galaxy, conquered species looked up at the stars and began to wonder, what if the human was right? What if there were ways to resist the Vorthons that no one had tried? The galaxy doesn't belong to whoever has the biggest fleet," Quan continued. "It belongs to whoever can think the fastest and adapt the quickest. And that means it belongs to all of us." Admiral Kexthon tried to jam the transmission, but it was too late. The message had already spread across the galaxy. On world after world, species that had given up hope began to think about rebellion. The Vorthon Empire had spent 1,000 years teaching the galaxy that resistance was hopeless. In one day, a single human ship had taught the galaxy something different. Maybe the mighty weren't as mighty as they seemed. Maybe the weak weren't as weak as they thought. And maybe it was time for everything to change. Ambassador Kyung-hee-jo sat in her office on the space station at Alpha Centauri. Around her, screens showed news feeds from across the galaxy. Every channel was talking about the same thing: one human ship stopping the entire Vorthon fleet. But Jo was watching something more important. "She was watching the political reports, ma'am," her assistant said, entering the room with a data pad. "The Crystalline Collective has sent a message. They want to meet with human representatives." Jo raised an eyebrow. The Crystalline Collective had ignored humans for 50 years. They were one of the oldest species in the galaxy, made of living crystal that could think and move. They had been conquered by the Vorthons 300 years ago. What do they want to discuss? Military cooperation. They want to know if humans would be willing to share our combat strategies. Jo looked at more reports. The Void Dancers wanted to meet. The Echo Mines were asking questions. Even species she had never heard of were suddenly interested in talking to humans. "Get me Admiral Han on Earth," she ordered. On the Indomitable, Captain Quan watched his tactical display. The Vorthon fleet was still frozen in space, but something was changing. Ships were moving within the fleet, but not toward him. They were repositioning themselves, forming new patterns. "Sir," Lieutenant Sujin said, "I think they're trying to surround us with their entire fleet." "Let them try," Quan replied. "Commander Park, take us toward the gas giant." The Indomitable moved away from the asteroid field toward Jupiter. The massive planet floated in space like a giant ball of swirling colors. Its moons orbited around it in perfect order. Behind them, the Vorthon fleet began to move. All 10,000 ships started following the single human vessel. On the Vorthon flagship, Admiral Kexthon felt better. Finally, his fleet was moving again. Finally, they had a plan. "We'll use the entire fleet," he told his commanders. "Surround the human ship completely. Even they can't escape from 10,000 ships." Commander Yeo Jin looked worried. Sir, every time we've tried to trap them, they've found a way to escape. Not this time. We'll use every ship we have. There will be nowhere for them to run. But Kexthan was making the same mistake that generals had made throughout human history. He was fighting the last battle instead of the next one. Dr. Jun Lee worked frantically in his laboratory on Earth. He had been studying Vorthon technology for months, trying to understand how their ships worked. But today he was looking for something specific. Found it, he said to his computer. The data he needed appeared on his screen. Information about Vorthon communication systems, their computer networks, their command structure. He sent an urgent message to the Indomitable. Captain Quan needed to know what he had discovered. On the human ship, Chief Scientist Yoonji Lee received Dr. Jun's message. She read it quickly, then ran to the bridge. "Captain," she said, "Dr. Lee on Earth has found something important about the Vorthon fleet." "What is it?" "Their ships are all connected by quantum communication links. Every ship in the fleet shares information instantly with every other ship. That's how they coordinate their attacks." Quan thought about this. "So if we could disrupt those links, the fleet would lose coordination. Each ship would have to fight alone." This was exactly the kind of information that human military doctrine was built to use. Find the enemy's strength, then turn it into a weakness. "Sujin," Quan called to his tactical officer, "can we hack into their communication system?" "Maybe, but we'd have to get very close to their flagship." Quan smiled.
"Then that's what we'll do." The Indomitable flew into Jupiter's atmosphere.
The gas giant's thick clouds hid the ship from Vorthon sensors. Behind them, the alien fleet tried to follow, but their big ships couldn't enter the planet's atmosphere safely. "Sir," the Vorthon navigation officer said, "we can't follow them into the planet. The atmospheric pressure would crush our ships." Admiral Kexthan stared at his screens in frustration. Once again, the humans had found a way to escape. Once again, they had used the environment in a way that Vorthon tactical doctrine never considered. But Quan wasn't hiding. He was preparing for the most dangerous part of his plan. The Indomitable burst out of Jupiter's atmosphere like a bullet shot from a gun. It flew straight toward the center of the Vorthon fleet, directly at Admiral Kexthan's flagship. "Sir," Yojin shouted, "the human ship is coming right at us. All ships open fire." 10,000 Vorthon ships fired their weapons at once. The space around the Indomitable filled with energy beams and missiles. But the human ship moved like it was dancing through the deadly light show. It flew between the energy beams. It rolled around the missiles. It used the Vorthon ships themselves as shields, forcing them to stop shooting or risk hitting their own vessels. "Impossible," Kexthan whispered. "No pilot can fly like that." But Captain Quan wasn't just a good pilot. He was thinking like a human. While the Vorthons tried to hit him with brute force, he was using their own confusion against them. The Indomitable reached the flagship and attached itself to the hull like a parasite. Immediately, Chief Scientist Yoonji began her work. "I'm into their communication system," she reported. "Uploading the virus now." Dr. Jun Lee had created more than just information about Vorthon technology. He had created a computer virus designed specifically for their systems, a virus that would spread through their quantum communication network like a disease. "Upload complete," Yoonji said. "The virus is spreading through their fleet." The effect was immediate. Across the Vorthon fleet, ships began losing contact with each other. The careful coordination that had made them so powerful disappeared. Each ship was suddenly alone. "Sir," Yojin said on the flagship bridge, "we've lost communication with the fleet. I can't contact any of our other ships." Admiral Kexthan realized what had happened. The humans had turned the Vorthon fleet's greatest strength into its greatest weakness. Their perfect communication system had become the perfect way to spread a computer virus. But the virus did more than just block communications. As it spread through each ship's computer system, it began broadcasting information, technical specifications, battle plans, even the locations of secret Vorthon bases. Everything was suddenly being transmitted across the galaxy for anyone to receive. On worlds throughout Vorthon space, conquered species received detailed information about their oppressors. They learned about Vorthon military weaknesses, about secret weapons, about political divisions within the Empire. The rebellion that had been sparked by the Indomitable's success now had the information it needed to fight back effectively. "Ambassador, Joe received urgent reports from across the galaxy. Admiral Han, you need to see this. Uprisings are starting on dozens of worlds. Species that have been slaves for centuries are fighting back. How is that possible? The virus that Captain Quan released didn't just disrupt their fleet. It gave every conquered species access to Vorthon military secrets. They know how to fight back now. On the Vorthon flagship, Admiral Kexton faced a choice he had never imagined. His fleet was scattered and confused. His empire was falling apart as worlds rebelled. And one human ship was still attached to his hull like a reminder of everything that had gone wrong. "Sir," Yojin said quietly. "What are your orders?" Kexton looked at his screens. He saw his mighty fleet drifting helplessly through space. He saw reports of rebellions on world after world. He saw the end of everything the Vorthon Empire had built. "Send a message to the human ship," he said finally. "Tell them we want to talk."